Hey everybody, welcome to another M365.video SharePoint short. I'm David Warner. Today we're going to keep talking about SharePoint library components, specifically simultaneous parallel development. Now it sounds complicated. What exactly is simultaneous parallel development? Well, it's the ability to develop your library component and the web part or extension that consumes the functionality from that library component in parallel at the same time. For us to be able to perform this parallel development, we'll need to set a few things up. Within this video, we're going to cover how we can gulp serve them both at the same time. Now, to accomplish this, we'll need some changes to the ports of our library component to ensure there's not a conflict with our web part or extension while they're both being gulp served. The second is we're going to see the benefits of the parallel development. And then lastly, I'll show you all of this in a demo to see exactly how it all works together. Before we get into the details of how to set up our solutions for simultaneous parallel development, I wanted to provide some more context to the concepts behind a library component for those who have not had any experience with them yet. The purpose of a library component is to provide you reusable components or functionality that can be used across multiple web parts. So in this illustration, on the left are a page with two web parts on them. They can each consume functionality that's been created or defined inside a single library component. And that library component is only loaded once in our DOM, but it's available to both web parts. So it's very, very handy. So the question is, how can we achieve simultaneous parallel development when we're creating a library component and a web part or an extension at the same time? Well, the key is that we want to gulp serve on both of them. But this requires changing our serve.json port, which is used by the library component. Now remember, the port is used when we gulp serve and it creates a server instance. We want to ensure that there's no local host port conflicts or collisions between the solutions. And because the connection to the library component is based on the NPM link and not the port, we can change the port for the library component without risking any problems. The benefit we receive by both running a gulp serve is that the gulp task runner will watch for changes in either our web part or extension as well as our library component. So if we're having to swap back and forth between changes in the web part, changes in the library component, and then changes in the web part again to consume those changes in the library component, we don't have to provide any manual requests to rebuild either of them. It will automatically happen when we save our files. That's pretty cool, and it provides for a very efficient development experience. Now let's jump over to Visual Studio Code, where I've set up a demo of a web part solution and a library component solution, and we'll see the changes that need to be made so that you can begin using simultaneous parallel development. Before we dive into the changes needed, let me set the context for this demo. I've scaffolded out a library component here, just basic out-of-the-box library component, and I've scaffolded out a web part that is going to consume this library component. Now I've already linked the two together. I've already created a video on this, and Microsoft has fantastic documentation, so I won't show you how to do that here. I just want to make sure you understood what it was that we were working with before we started making changes. On the right, I've got two command prompt windows. The top right is pointing to the directory of the library component, so we could gulp serve there. And the bottom is the web part that's consuming the library component, so we'll also gulp serve there. Now both of them will show the status as we make changes to each and save the files. The gulp task runner will watch and rebuild when it sees changes to those files occurring. Now before we do gulp serve each of them, we need to first make the change to the library component that we had talked about so that there's no local host port conflicts when they both are initiated with the gulp serve. We can do that by going into the library component, and we'll go ahead and open up the serve.json. And right here under the port property, we can change that to anything we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it to 4.5s. We'll save that, and we'll go ahead and close it and close up our library component. Now we're ready to go ahead and kick off the gulp serve command for both our library component and our web part. So we'll go ahead and click into our library component first, and I'm going to go ahead and issue the no browser command as well. We don't need to open up a browser for this demo, so we'll just go ahead and kick it off with that parameter. And the same thing for our web part. So now they've both finished the subtask reload and are listening for any changes to the solutions. So let's start out by taking a look at what I've added to the web part. We'll go ahead and open up the primary TypeScript file, and we'll close the Explorer there. And we'll see I've already created an instance for our library. And it's just using an out-of-the-box library, so we know that out of the box there's a name method available. So if I come into my library instance, and I do library instance dot, we can see that name method is available for us right there. But let's go ahead and make a change to our library component by adding another method. We can see that only the name was available, but we're going to go into our library component, we're going to add another method, and then we're going to come back and see that it's available to us right here on our web part. So we'll go ahead and close that. We don't want to save. And let's go ahead and go back into our File Explorer. We'll close the web part, we'll open the library, and we'll open up the primary library component TypeScript file. Now we're just going to go ahead and add in a very simple method. I'm calling it version. Public version, it's returning a string, and it's just telling the user the version that's currently being used of this library component. Now the next thing to pay attention to is the command prompt in the upper right for our library component. When I save this file, we're going to see that the task runner for the gulp is now listening and it's recompiling the file changes that we just made to the TypeScript file. And because the connection between the library component and the web part is established using npm link, we can go switch over to our web part and see that this public version method is available to us immediately. So let's go ahead and close our library component TypeScript file. Open back up our Explorer window. We'll close our library component, go back to the web part, and go back into our web part TypeScript file and close our library Explorer window. So now I should be able to engage my library component just like I did before, where I saw the name method available. But now we should see both the name and the version. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and type library instance dot, and now we see both name and version are available for us. And if I went ahead and just instantiated that and click save, notice in the lower right the rebuilding or transpiling of my web part is now occurring automatically when I click save. So hopefully you can see how beneficial this is, because in reality it's unlikely we're going to completely build our library component without testing it through a web part or an extension that may require us to go back and forth between each and make tweaks along our development path. So using this parallel development technique, we're able to make changes to our library component as well as the web parts or extensions that are consuming that library component, and we see all of the changes reflected immediately and simultaneously so that we can take advantage of them without having to manually rebuild or refresh the solutions. Here are some useful links to help you if you're looking to develop library components for SharePoint. The first two is the Microsoft documentation, provides an overview and a tutorial. The second two are other videos that I've created that provide an introduction to library components, as well as provide some performance-friendly optimized bundling techniques that you might want to look into.
Thanks again for watching, and be sure to subscribe in YouTube to get alerts for all my future videos.